Welcome back to Finance Empire. I buy real-life stories. Imagine this for a second. You are only 24 hours away from losing everything. Your landlord is threatening eviction. Your bank account is empty. Your phone is silent because nobody can help you anymore. Then suddenly, while walking home in the pouring rain, you find a wallet. Inside, exactly $1,000. The exact amount you need to save your apartment. Nobody saw you pick it up. Nobody knows you have it. And the owner is a complete stranger. What would you do? Would you keep the money and save yourself? Or would you return it and risk losing everything? Today's story is one of the hardest moral dilemmas a person can face. And trust me, by the end of this story, you're going to ask yourself a very important question. What is honesty really worth? So grab a coffee, relax, and let's begin. The rain hammered against the sidewalks like thousands of tiny drums. Leo walked slowly through the empty streets with his hands buried deep inside his jacket pockets. His shoes were soaked. His clothes were soaked. And honestly, his hopes felt soaked too. Just 30 minutes earlier, his landlord had handed him a final eviction notice. $1,000. That was all he needed. Not 10,000. Not 50,000. Just 1,000. Yet somehow it felt impossible. For weeks, Leo had been searching for extra work. He had filled out applications, made phone calls, asked friends for help. Nothing had worked. Every option had disappeared one by one until he felt completely trapped. His back was against the wall. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement as Leo stared at the eviction notice once again. Tomorrow morning. Those two words echoed inside his mind. Tomorrow morning he would either pay the rent or lose his home. No more chances. No more excuses. No more delays. Leo folded the paper and shoved it into his pocket. Then something unexpected happened. His shoe struck a heavy object near the curb. At first he thought it was a piece of trash, but when he looked down he saw a dark leather wallet partially submerged in a puddle. His heart skipped a beat. He bent down and picked it up. It felt unusually heavy. Very heavy. Leo looked around. The street was completely empty. No cars, no pedestrians, nobody. The rain continued falling as he hurried beneath a nearby awning. Then he slowly opened the wallet. The moment he looked inside, his breathing stopped. Money. A lot of money. His hands started shaking. Carefully he counted the bills. 100, 200, 300. His pulse raced faster with every bill. By the time he finished counting, he felt dizzy. $1,000. Exactly $1,000. The exact amount written on the eviction notice. Leo stared at the money. Then he laughed. Not because it was funny, because it felt impossible. What were the chances? Out of all the numbers in the world, the wallet contained exactly the amount he needed. For a moment it felt like fate, like the universe had finally decided to help him. Then he noticed the driver's license. Arthur Vance. An older man with kind eyes and grey hair smiled back from the ID photo. Suddenly the money didn't feel like a miracle anymore. It felt like a problem. A very big problem. Leo returned home and spread everything across the kitchen table. The money, the wallet, the identification card, and the eviction notice. It looked like some strange game created by fate itself. On one side of the table sat his future. On the other sat his conscience. For over an hour he simply stared, thinking, calculating, arguing with himself. If I keep it, nobody will know. The thought appeared instantly. Then another thought followed. But I'll know. He stood up and began pacing around the apartment. His mind was spinning in circles. Arthur Vance could probably recover. Maybe he was wealthy. Maybe he had insurance. Maybe losing the money wouldn't destroy his life. But what about Leo? What about him? Wasn't he allowed to survive? Didn't his situation matter too? The arguments became louder, more convincing, more dangerous. Eventually, Leo opened his laptop and searched Arthur Vance online. What he found made everything worse. Arthur owned a small bakery nearby. The photos showed a hard-working man struggling to keep a family business alive. There were posts about rising cost, broken equipment, financial challenges. Nothing about Arthur looked wealthy. Nothing about him looked secure. Leo closed the laptop. The guilt hit harder than ever. This wasn't rich man money. This wasn't spare cash. This was real money, Important money. The kind of money that could affect people's lives. Hours passed. Outside, the rain continued. Inside, Leo continued fighting himself. Then came the knock. 3 loud bangs rattled the apartment door. Leo nearly jumped out of his skin. Mr. Roper. The landlord. The worst possible person at the worst possible moment. Leo quickly stuffed the wallet into his pocket and opened the door. Mr. Roper didn't waste time. He wanted his money. Now. Not tomorrow. Not next week, now. Leo somehow convinced him to wait until morning. Just one more night. One final chance. But after the landlord left, the pressure became unbearable. The wallet felt heavier than a bag of bricks. He couldn't sleep, couldn't think, couldn't relax. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Arthur's face. Then he saw himself standing on the sidewalk with nowhere to live. The battle continued all night. Honesty versus survival. Conscience versus desperation. Right versus easy. By sunrise, Leo still hadn't made a decision. The wallet sat on the kitchen table. The clock ticked louder and louder, and somewhere across town, Arthur Vance still had no idea where his missing wallet had gone. Leo looked down at his phone, then at the wallet, then back at the phone. His thumb hovered above the screen. One call. That was all it would take. One call would change everything. Either he would save himself, or he would save a stranger. But he couldn't save both. Leo took a deep breath, picked up the phone, and finally made his choice. To be continued in part 2. Part 2 की शुरुआत इस लाइन से करो. Leo's thumb trembled above the screen for one final second. Then, with his heart pounding in his chest, he pressed the call button and prepared to change both his life and Arthur Vance's forever. Leo's thumb trembled above the screen for one final second. Then, with his heart pounding in his chest, he pressed the call button and prepared to change both his life and Arthur Vance's forever. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Each ring felt louder than the last. Leo gripped the edge of the kitchen table so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His stomach twisted into knots as he waited for someone to answer. Finally, a tired voice came through the speaker. Hello? Vance's Sweet Treats Bakery. Leo swallowed hard. Hello? Is this Mr. Arthur Vance? For a brief moment there was silence. Yes, this is Arthur speaking. Leo closed his eyes. Everything suddenly felt real. The decision had been made. There was no turning back now. Mr. Vance, my name is Leo. I think I found something that belongs to you. The old man's breathing instantly changed. What did you find? A black leather wallet. The reaction was immediate. Leo heard a loud crash on the other end of the line, followed by hurried footsteps. My wallet? Arthur asked, his voice shaking. Yes, sir. There was a long pause. Then Leo heard something that surprised him. Arthur sounded as if he was about to cry. Oh, thank God, he whispered. You have no idea how worried I've been. The relief in Arthur's voice hit Leo harder than any lecture ever could. For the first time, he understood exactly how much the missing wallet meant to its owner. Everything is still inside, Leo said quietly. Another pause followed. Everything? Yes, sir. Arthur exhaled slowly. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Arthur asked if they could meet at the bakery as soon as possible. Leo agreed. When the call ended, he looked down at the wallet resting on the table. A strange feeling washed over him. His problems hadn't disappeared. He was still behind on rent. He was still facing eviction. But somehow the crushing weight inside his chest felt lighter. For the first time all night, he could breathe. 30 minutes later, Leo pushed open the bakery door. A small bell chimed overhead. The smell of fresh bread instantly filled the air. Warm cinnamon. Vanilla. Coffee. The bakery felt completely different from the cold apartment he had left behind. Behind the counter stood Arthur Vance. The older man looked exhausted. Dark circles sat beneath his eyes. It was obvious he hadn't slept much either. The moment he spotted the wallet in Leo's hands, his entire face changed. Hope replaced fear. Relief replaced panic. Leo walked forward and carefully placed the wallet on the counter. Arthur picked it up with both hands. For several seconds he simply stared at it. Then he opened it. One by one he checked everything. The identification cards, the receipts, the photographs. And finally the cash. When he reached the stack of bills, his shoulders visibly relaxed. Everything was there, not a single dollar missing. Arthur slowly zipped the wallet shut. Then he looked directly at Leo. "Thank you." The words were simple, but the emotion behind them was powerful. Leo nodded awkwardly. It was the right thing to do. Arthur shook his head. "You don't understand." He glanced around the bakery. "My employees were supposed to be paid today." Leo frowned. Arthur continued. "That money wasn't mine." The words immediately caught Leo's attention. "It belonged to my workers." Arthur pointed toward the kitchen. "I have 3 employees, good people, hard-working people." His voice softened. "One of them has a newborn baby. Another is helping her father through medical treatment. The third is paying for college." Leo felt his stomach drop. Arthur looked down at the wallet. If I had lost this money, their families would have suffered. A chill ran through Leo's body. The reality hit him all at once. Last night he had only seen numbers. $1,000. Rent. Eviction. Survival. But now he could see the faces behind the money. Real people. Real families. Real consequences. If he had taken the cash, the damage would have reached far beyond Arthur. The thought made him uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. Arthur suddenly smiled. "Wait right here." The older man disappeared into the back room and returned moments later carrying an envelope. He placed it on the counter. "A reward." Leo immediately shook his head. "No." Arthur pushed the envelope closer. "You earned it." "No, sir." "You returned $1,000. Leo smiled weakly. "Because it wasn't mine." Arthur stared at him. The old baker seemed impressed, almost shocked. Most people would have accepted the reward instantly. But Leo couldn't do it. Not after everything. Not after spending an entire night battling his conscience. Arthur finally nodded. Then he poured 2 cups of coffee. "Sit with me." Leo hesitated before taking a seat. For the next 20 minutes they talked. Really talked. Arthur shared stories about building the bakery from nothing, about working 18-hour days, about sleeping beside the ovens when money was tight. Leo listened carefully. Then, without planning to, he told Arthur everything. The eviction notice, the overdue rent, the empty bank account, the sleepless night. Even the temptation to keep the wallet. Arthur listened without interrupting. When Leo finally finished speaking, the old baker sat quietly for a moment. Then he smiled. "You know what impresses me most?" Leo looked up. "What?" Arthur pointed toward the wallet. "The fact that you almost made the wrong choice." Leo blinked. Arthur continued. "Honesty isn't difficult when life is easy." The baker leaned forward. "Character reveals itself when doing the right thing hurts." Those words stayed with Leo. Arthur reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook. "I have a question." "Okay." "Do you have a driver's license?" Leo nodded. Arthur smiled wider. "Good." The old baker explained that his delivery driver had unexpectedly quit the previous week. Orders were piling up. Customers were complaining. The bakery desperately needed help. Arthur looked directly at Leo. "I need someone I can trust." Leo felt his heart skip. "And after last night," Arthur continued, "I think I found exactly that person." The offer felt unreal. A job, a real opportunity, a chance to start fixing his life. Leo accepted immediately. The two shook hands across the table. For the first time in months, Leo felt hopeful. But one major problem still remained. The rent. The clock was still ticking. An hour later, Leo stood outside his apartment building. Mr. Roper was already waiting. The landlord's expression looked as friendly as a thunderstorm. "Do you have my money?" Leo took a deep breath. "No." The landlord sighed heavily. "I was afraid of that." But before he could continue, Leo held up a hand. "I don't have the money today." Then he showed him the signed employment agreement from Arthur. Mr. Roper read the paper carefully. His eyes narrowed, then widened, then narrowed again. "You turned down $1,000? Leo nodded. The landlord stared at him as if he had lost his mind. Finally, Mr. Roper laughed. Not a mocking laugh, a genuine one. "You're either incredibly foolish or incredibly honest." Leo smiled. "Maybe both." For a long moment, the landlord remained silent. Then he folded the paper. 1 week. What? 1 week extension. Leo could hardly believe it. Mr. Roper shrugged. A man who returns $1,000 when he's broke deserves a chance. Relief flooded through Leo's body. He thanked the landlord repeatedly. As Mr. Roper walked away, Leo looked up at the bright morning sky. 24 hours earlier, everything had seemed hopeless. Now things were different. Not perfect, but different. Over the next several weeks, Leo worked harder than he ever had before. Every morning started early. Every weekend was spent making deliveries. Every paycheck brought him one step closer to stability. The bakery flourished. Customers returned. Orders increased. And Leo slowly rebuilt his life. One evening after closing time, Arthur handed him a cup of coffee. The two sat quietly near the bakery window. "You know," Arthur said, "most people think that wallet story was about money." Leo smiled. "What was it really about?" Arthur pointed toward him. "It was about a choice." Leo looked outside. The rain had started falling again. Just like that night. But this time it felt different. Warmer. Almost comforting. Because he finally understood something important. The wallet hadn't saved his life. His decision had. And sometimes, the hardest choice is the one that changes everything. Leo's thumb trembled above the screen for one final second. Then, with his heart pounding in his chest, he pressed the call button and prepared to change both his life and Arthur Vance's forever. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Each ring seemed louder than the last, echoing through the silent apartment like a countdown clock. Leo stood by the kitchen window, staring at the grey morning sky, while sweat gathered on his forehead despite the cold air. Then the call connected. "Hello?" an older voice answered cautiously. Leo swallowed hard. "Mr. Vance, my name is Leo. I think I found something that belongs to you." For a brief moment there was complete silence. Then came a sharp intake of breath. "My wallet?" Arthur asked immediately. The desperation in his voice shocked Leo. "Yes, sir." "My black leather wallet?" "Yes." Arthur's voice cracked. "Oh, thank goodness." Leo closed his eyes. In that instant he knew he had made the right choice. The relief in Arthur's voice sounded genuine. It wasn't the reaction of a wealthy businessman who had misplaced some spare cash. It was the reaction of someone who had been carrying a heavy burden all night. "You have no idea how worried I've been," Arthur said quietly. Leo glanced at the eviction notice on his table. Ironically, he could say exactly the same thing. They arranged to meet at the bakery 30 minutes later. When the call ended, Leo felt strangely lighter. His financial problems still existed. His landlord was still expecting money. His future was still uncertain. But for the first time since finding the wallet, he could breathe normally. The guilt that had been crushing him all night finally loosened its grip. As he walked through the city streets toward the bakery, the world seemed different. The rain had stopped. The clouds were beginning to break apart. Small rays of sunlight pushed through the grey sky. Leo wasn't sure whether it was a sign or just a coincidence, but he chose to see it as hope. When he arrived at Vance's Sweet Treats, the bakery was already busy. Customers filled the small shop. Fresh bread lined the shelves. The smell of cinnamon, coffee, and warm pastries drifted through the air. Behind the counter stood Arthur Vance. The older man looked exhausted. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes. His normally cheerful expression had been replaced by worry. Then he spotted Leo. And everything changed. Arthur's face lit up instantly. He hurried around the counter faster than a man his age probably should have. Leo handed him the wallet. Arthur accepted it with both hands. For several seconds he simply held it. He didn't even open it immediately. Instead he closed his eyes as though he had just recovered something far more valuable than money. Finally he unzipped it. His fingers quickly counted the cash. 100, 200, 300, all the way to 1,000. Every dollar was still there. Arthur looked up at Leo with disbelief. "You didn't take anything." Leo shook his head. "No, sir." Arthur stared at him. "Not even one bill?" "No." The baker laughed softly. Then to Leo's surprise, tears formed in the corners of his eyes. "You restored my faith in people today." Leo wasn't sure how to respond. Nobody had ever said something like that to him before. Arthur invited him to sit. A few minutes later, they were sharing coffee at a small corner table. The bakery assistants moved around them, preparing orders, while Arthur explained why the money mattered so much. The cash wasn't for himself. It wasn't for a vacation. It wasn't for luxury purchases. It was payroll. 3 employees were expecting their weekly wages that afternoon. Without that money, Arthur would have had to tell hard-working people that they couldn't be paid. The thought made Leo feel sick. Had he kept the wallet, he wouldn't just have hurt Arthur. He would have hurt 3 entire families. Sometimes our choices affect people we never even meet. Arthur eventually noticed the worried expression on Leo's face. "Something's bothering you." Leo hesitated. Part of him wanted to keep his troubles private, but another part felt that honesty deserved honesty. So he told Arthur everything. The eviction notice, the overdue rent, the sleepless night, the temptation, the guilt, the fear. Arthur listened without interrupting. When Leo finished, the older man sat quietly for several moments. Then he nodded slowly. "You know what impresses me most?" "What?" "The fact that you admitted you were tempted." Leo looked confused. Arthur smiled. "Most people want to appear perfect, but perfection isn't real. Character isn't about never facing temptation. Character is about what you choose when temptation arrives." Those words stayed with Leo. Character is about what you choose. Not what you say, not what you promise, what you choose. Arthur then surprised him. "I need help." Leo blinked. "Help? My delivery driver quit yesterday." Arthur chuckled. "Actually, that's another reason I was panicking about the wallet." He explained that business had increased recently. Several local cafes were placing large orders. Without a reliable driver, the bakery was struggling. "I need someone trustworthy." Arthur folded his arms. "And after today, trust is the one thing I know you have." Hope flickered inside Leo. Arthur offered him a job. The pay wasn't enormous, but it was enough. Enough to help. Enough to create stability. Enough to give him a chance. Leo accepted immediately. They shook hands. At that moment, neither man realized how important that handshake would become. Because it wasn't just the beginning of employment. It was the beginning of friendship. An hour later, Leo stood outside his apartment building facing Mr. Roper. The landlord looked impatient. His clipboard was already in hand. "So?" Mr. Roper asked. "Do you have my money?" Leo took a deep breath. "No." The landlord sighed heavily. "I was afraid of that. But I do have something else." Leo explained everything, from the wallet, to Arthur, to the job offer, to the decision he had made. Mr. Roper listened carefully. When the story ended, he shook his head in disbelief. "You returned $1,000? "Yes." "When you needed exactly $1,000? "Yes." The landlord stared at him. Then something unexpected happened. Mr. Roper smiled. It wasn't a large smile. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. "I've been a landlord for 20 years. He crossed his arms. "And most people only talk about honesty." Leo waited nervously. "You actually practiced it." The older man looked at the employment agreement Arthur had signed. Then he nodded. 1 week. "What?" 1 week extension. Relief flooded through Leo's body. "Really?" Mr. Roper shrugged. "I have a feeling you're going to keep your word." Leo thanked him repeatedly. As the landlord walked away, the future suddenly seemed possible again. Not guaranteed, not easy, but possible. The following weeks were exhausting. Leo worked harder than ever before. His weekdays were spent at his regular job. His weekends belonged to the bakery. He woke up before sunrise, delivered bread across the city, carried heavy boxes, learned delivery routes, met cafe owners, managed schedules. Sometimes he felt completely exhausted. But unlike before, he had purpose. Every paycheck represented progress. Every delivery represented opportunity. Every day moved him further away from crisis. And something else happened. Arthur became more than a boss. He became a mentor. The older baker shared lessons about business, responsibility, and life. He taught Leo that success wasn't built overnight. It was built through small decisions repeated consistently. Good decisions, honest decisions, disciplined decisions. Months passed. The bakery grew. Leo's finances improved. His rent was always paid on time. His savings account slowly expanded. For the first time in years, he wasn't merely surviving, he was building something. One evening after closing time, Arthur handed Leo a small envelope. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a bonus check. Leo's eyes widened. "Arthur, this is too much." The baker laughed. "No." He pointed toward the busy bakery. "This is what trust looks like when it grows." Leo looked around the shop. Customers filled the room. Employees smiled. Business was thriving, all because of one decision made on a rainy night. Arthur raised his coffee cup. "You know something funny?" "What?" "If you hadn't found my wallet, we probably never would have met." Leo smiled. "Yeah. And if you had kept it, neither of our lives would be what they are now." For a moment, both men sat quietly, thinking about fate, choices, second chances, the strange way life works. Sometimes the thing that looks like a solution is actually a trap, and sometimes doing the harder thing opens doors you never knew existed. That night, as Leo walked home beneath the city lights, he remembered how hopeless he had felt standing in the rain with that wallet in his hands. Back then he thought the $1,000 was the answer. But he had been wrong. The money would have solved 1 month. His integrity had changed his future. And as he unlocked the door to his apartment, stepped inside, and looked around the home he had almost lost, Leo finally understood something important. The greatest rewards in life don't always arrive immediately. Sometimes they arrive because you chose the right path when nobody was watching. And sometimes one honest decision can change everything. To be continued.